Hello everyone! Today we're going to learn 8 different embroidery stitches. To begin, you will need some floss, a sewing or embroidery needle, a pair of scissors, and we're going to be practicing on a paper plate. On this plate you can see the 8 different stitches we're going to learn. Whip stitch, running stitch, back stitch, cross stitch, chain stitch, as well as French knots, satin stitch, and a lazy daisy. To begin, measure out how much floss you're going to be using. I already have a tail or like a pre-cut piece on mine, so I'm just going to use this. To thread for sewing, you're going to put one tail through the eye of the needle. The floss is made of 6 different strands, which do like to separate. So try to hold them as close to the end as you can and then wiggle them through. If you are having a hard time with that, another trick is to put a loop in the middle like this and then push that tiny little loop through and you're not going to have anything fray. For this, we are having a short tail and we're going to have a long tail, which we need to put a knot at the end. To do the knot, it's something called the quilter's knot. We also call it the magic knot in my classroom. So basically what we're doing is we're matching the tail to the eye of the needle. We're pointing them at each other. So we're going to point them, we're going to stack them, and then we're going to pinch like this so that your string is making a letter O. So I'll show you up in the air now. I'm holding the end of the needle. The end of the needle is the eye of the needle. I hold the eye, hold the tail, point them, and I'm basically handing this tail to this thumb and finger that are already doing the work of holding the needle. Now I have my O. Taking your free hand, you're going to grab this tail and you're going to wrap it around the needle a few times. So wrap around the needle, maybe 3 or 4 times. And then you're going to push that wrapping down to the pinched thumb and finger. So again, I have a free hand. Take just the needle itself, and the other fingers are doing this work of pinching. And you're going to pinch your fingers together and keep pinching and pulling them apart. Now you have to be careful because this tail is going to want to come out. So I'm going to pinch that short tail so I don't lose it. And I'm going to keep holding and pinching this one until it stops in a knot. If it doesn't work the first time, give it a try again. It will get easier the more you practice it. We have also done it where we match both tails up and then tie it that way. But I like to do it this way because you're only using then the single strand, which is the 6 strands. And then I can just slide the needle off when I'm all done. All right, let's start with our whip stitch. The whip stitch, because we're practicing on a plate, we do want to poke our holes in again. Whip stitches are always for the edge, so that's why you'll notice my whip stitch is on the edge of my plate. Let's just do a few together. I'm going to poke 4 holes. Now, if this side that you would eat on is the front of the plate, you want the knot to be coming from the back side. So turn the plate over, go through the first hole, come up. The knot should catch and stop. The whip stitch means that we are always coming from the same direction. We're always going to be poking up. And so now I need to drop this around and I'm going to poke up through the second hole and pull and see how it wraps itself around the edge like that. Continue that for a few times. All right, there you go. That's the whip stitch. Okay, let's move on. The next one's going to be the running stitch. I'm just going to do a few of each one. So I'll put 4 dots on, poke 4 holes. When we sew on fabric, obviously you don't need to poke the holes ahead of time. All right, because I'm just keeping the same piece of string because I'm practicing, I'm not going to tie a knot and cut here. I'm just going to come down to the first hole and come up. Running stitch is an up-down stitch, so I came up from the bottom. Now I go down the next hole, pull through, come up the next hole, pull down. There we go. So 4 holes gets you these 2 stitches. If you do a row of them, you get a dashed line. That's the running stitch. All right, next, back stitch. Poke a few holes again. So the longer the stitch, that means the further the holes are apart. Usually when you're sewing, you want a shorter stitch, but for demonstration purposes, I'm doing it a little bit bigger. Back stitch is going to start very similar. So we come up from the back, go down, come up the 3rd hole. But instead of going forwards, we're going to go back. So it's the back stitch. So we go back through that hole, come up through the next one, and we go back again. A back stitch is going to create a straight line. A running stitch is going to create a dashed line. All right, next, let's do a couple cross stitches. Cross stitches make X's. You could do them as tall or small as you want. Okay, I'm going to start up here, top left corner, and I don't want to go straight down or straight across. I want to come down at a diagonal. Cross stitch is all about making these diagonals. So I have one part of my X now, and I can come up either this hole or that hole. Either way is fine. So if I come up this one, then I go down that one. Okay, that's one X. Now I'm ready to do another X. So I just went down that hole. I can't come up it, but for starting, I can come up any of these 3 holes. I'll take this one, cross diagonally down, and now I can either come up this hole or this hole. The more you do this, the more you'll have a pattern and you'll be going down the same holes every time. There we go. That's the cross stitch. I'm running low on thread, so I'm going to stop here and not do the 3rd X. But instead, let's show you how to tie this off so that you can get a new piece of string. When you are ready to do a knot, you're going to take the needle, slide it under a stitch that's close by. So for instance, this is a stitch close by. Now I'm going to take my needle. Ideally, you need a lot of string left to do this. I'm getting a little short. But what you want to do is you want to go back in this loop that you've created here. So I go back in that loop, pull tight, and I want to repeat it. So go under the last stitch, go slow because you want to grab this loop here and pull tight, and now it's secured. Next, we'll do a few chain stitches. So a chain stitch is a way of adding a decorative stitch with a series of loops that are inside each other to create this chain. To start, again, we always start from the back. We don't want any of this on the front side. We want the fronts to look very clean. Now, instead of going down hole number 2, I'm going to go back down the first hole. So I go back down the first hole, and I want to pull very slowly because I need to leave a loop up here. I'm going to put the loop over the next hole. So it's going this direction. I'm going to go up hole number 2 and make sure it's like this. So I'm pulling the thread through that loop and it's going to catch like that. All right, to repeat the chain stitch, you just go back again through the hole that you're in, pulling slow so you leave some thread up top, Go up through the next hole, pull it over, and now pull it tight. To finish your chain, just go back in the hole that you're at, but you're going to go on the other side of the loop, so that way you're not undoing the loop. There you go. Now I've had 3 chains. Okay, other decorative details. French knots are a way to add a little dot. So you could add a decoration that has little dots on it, or if you may be making an animal face and you might want to use these for eyes or nose or other details. We'll make a hole. We're going to come up from the back. I'm going to put the plate down because I kind of need both hands to do this. So basically a French knot is a way that we're going to wrap the floss around the needle, and then we're going to go back down that through the hole. It's similar to how we make our knot to tie on the end of our string. I came up through the hole. I'm going to take the end closest to where it's coming up, and I'm going to wrap that a few times around my needle. I might use my finger here to help capture and keep them on. So now you can see I have a little wrapped piece. I'm going to slide my needle back through the hole, and as I pull it down, it captures and makes a little knot. All right, let's take a look at the last 2. All right, satin stitch. Now, I cannot do a satin stitch as close as I normally can, because if I do it too close on a paper plate, this part's actually going to come apart and fall in. But basically, a satin stitch is where you would draw a shape. You come up the top hole, go straight down the bottom hole. Come up the top hole again, straight down the bottom hole. And if you're doing them very close together, you can fill in an entire shape with thread. The last one is the lazy daisy, and this one I'll demonstrate. Lazy daisy is kind of a combination of the chain stitch, but we're going to do it a few different times. So I have a hole for the middle, and I need a hole at each of the ends of the petals. Come up the hole in the middle. You might need to put your plate down for this one again too. So we're going to make that loop kind of like we did for the chain stitch. We're going to go back in the center, and we need to come up this hole. There we go. It's hard to find them. This way. Like that. And then you go back in that hole. And now you can see a 5-pointed one. So really you could do this again and again to make a very full one. I hope that was helpful to you. Feel free to go back, pause, rewatch other parts again when you're stuck on a certain stitch or if you're stuck on the knot part. But again, I hope you have fun and create.